how do we even get the idea of perfect when, let's be honest, nothing we ever see is actually perfect? It's a really deep puzzle, and to get to the bottom of it, we're going to have to travel back thousands of years to ancient Greece and dig into Plato's fascinating theory of innate identity.
Okay, let's start with a really simple thought experiment. Picture two sticks, or maybe two coins, whatever. You'd probably say they're equal or the same, right? But are they really? I mean, if you get out a microscope, one's always going to be a tiny bit different from the other. So here's the kicker. If we've never ever seen two things that are perfectly equal in the real world, where in the world did we get the idea of perfect equality in the first place?
Yeah, this is exactly what we're going to call the puzzle of sameness. And it's a puzzle that pops up right out of our day-to-day lives.
Now for Plato, the answer was kind of obvious. He was like, look, you can't get an idea of perfection from a world that's, well, imperfect. He believed the physical world we see and touch, what he called the sensible world, is always changing, always in a state of flux. Think about it. Nothing ever stays exactly the same. And because of that, he argued that you can't build real, solid knowledge on something so shaky and unreliable.
So if the idea of perfect sameness doesn't come from the world around us, then where does it come from? And this is where we get to Plato's really radical solution. He proposed that the idea is already in our minds, before we ever experience anything at all.
Okay, to really get this, we've got to talk about two different kinds of knowledge. First, you've got a priori knowledge. Think of this as knowledge you have before experience. It's innate, it's just built in. For Plato, the pure concept of equality fits right in here. Then, on the other hand, you have a posteriori knowledge. This is the stuff you learn from experience, from observing the world. And that is where the everyday act of looking at two things and calling them equal comes into play.
And Plato was super clear about this. He basically said that we absolutely must know what the equal itself is before we can ever look at two objects and say they're equal. That innate idea, that perfect concept, it has to be there first.
But that raises a huge question, doesn't it? If this perfect idea is in our minds before we've seen anything, where on earth did it come from? How did it get there? Well, that brings us to Plato's most famous idea, his theory of two completely different worlds.
So Plato basically said there are two realities. First, there's the sensible world. That's our world, the one we see, touch, and smell. It's messy, it's full of imperfect copies, and it's always changing. But then he said there's another place, the realm of ideas, or realm of forms. Now this place is perfect. It's eternal, it never changes, and you can't see it with your eyes. You can only understand it with your mind. And this realm, he argued, contains the perfect original blueprints for everything in our world, including the perfect form of equality itself.
And here's the really mind-bending part. For Plato, an idea like perfect equality isn't just a thought floating around in your head. No way. It's a real thing, what he called a Platonic universal. It's this perfect objective concept that exists all on its own, completely separate from our minds and the physical world. His belief was that our souls actually hung out in this realm of ideas and saw these perfect forms before we were even born.
All right, so if we have this perfect built-in blueprint for equality, how do we actually use it in our messy, everyday lives? This is where it's super important to understand the difference between having the concept and the actual act of recognizing something.
So the whole process of making a judgment kind of works like this. Step 1, we've already got that perfect a priori idea of equality, just sitting there in our minds. Step 2, we have a real-world experience, like we see two sticks on the ground. Step 3, our mind automatically compares those imperfect sticks to our perfect innate idea. And finally, step 4, we make an a posteriori judgment. We recognize those sticks as equal, at least for all practical purposes.
And this is really the key insight to the whole thing. In Plato's view, when we say two things in our world are equal, we're not actually seeing perfect equality, not even close. What we're seeing are just shadows, or maybe blurry copies. The actual objects are just crude approximations of that perfect form we already have locked away in our minds.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. What's the big deal? What's the main takeaway from this ancient philosophical puzzle? Well, let's talk about why this idea of what might be built into your mind is still so important today. So, if you're going to remember anything, remember this. First, the idea of sameness is innate. It's a priori, not something we learn from scratch. Second, because of that, we have a perfect mental measuring stick for equality. Third, we use that perfect standard to make sense of and judge the imperfect stuff we see every day.
And finally, and this is crucial, Plato draws a sharp line between the pure concept of identity and the everyday act of recognizing it. And that, of course, leaves us with a really fascinating and much, much bigger question to think about. I mean, if Plato's right, if the concept of equality is really built into our minds from the very beginning, what else is in there? What about huge ideas like justice or beauty, or even something as basic as numbers? What other fundamental blueprints of reality might already be wired into our consciousness before we ever even open our eyes to the world?